A lot of people think binding prayer, lay people should not do binding prayers. So what are
Prayers.
they, and what's the limit or the extent of binding prayers?
First, we have to establish first a theological principle, which is prayer begets what it signifies. So what you ask for is what you're going to get. So in relationship to the, because Christ said, knock and it will be opened. He didn't say knock and I'll give you a car. He said, I'll knock and it'll be open. You know, ask and you shall receive. So there's a correspondence between what you ask for and what it's going to do. So what your prayer signifies is what it's going to beget. Okay, so in relationship to a binding prayer, what a binding prayer is basically what you're doing is you're adding, and then I'll talk about the structure of how it works. So you're taking some sacred thing, like by the precious blood of Jesus. So you're invoking the precious blood of Jesus. By the precious blood of Jesus, I bind the spirit of anger or what have you. And so by invoking the precious blood of Jesus, you're asking it to come down and be the thing that causes the efficacy of the binding prayer to bind this particular demon that's causing you to be angry. Okay, so that's the structure. That's the spiritual structure and how it works. So who can do it? So basically, demons are legalists, and it all revolves around the authority structure. If you have authority to do it, then you can actually do it. So in relationship to binding prayers, parents can, because they have the natural law authority. So there's two structures of authority. There's the divine positive law and the natural law. The divine positive law is that bishops, priests, and deacons, so for example, bishops and priests, they can do binding prayers over anybody they want. And then because of the fact that they're the go to teach all nations, they have jurisdiction that extends to everybody, etc. Then there's the natural law structure, and so this is, I talk about it in the books primarily in the context of the family. So the husband can do it over his wife because he has authority. He can also do it over his wife because of the fact that he has rights over her body by virtue of the marital contract. The wife can do it in relationship to the husband, not because she has headship over him, but because of the rights in relationship to his body through the marital contract. The father and the mother can do it over the children because they have authority over the children. I then also talk about the fact that as exorcists, by the way, for 15 years, I've been watching the patterns. When people pray for other people against the demons, who's getting taken to the woodshed and who isn't? In other words, who's subject to the retaliation and who isn't? And if you follow the authority structure, you're not going to be affected by the retaliation, generally speaking. And so what we found out is, obviously, if you follow that family structure, the parents just usually don't get retaliated against as long as they're leading Catholic lives and staying in the state of grace habitually, etc. But then also we found out that there's obligations, that people have towards each other. So siblings have obligations of the fourth commandment to each other. The children have obligations in relationship to the parents. So we've actually found that because of that obligation of the fourth commandment, which by extension, if you read some of the old moral manuals, they say that children eventually may be responsible for providing materially or spiritually for their parents and taking care of them, etc. And it's because of that obligation that arises from the natural law in the fourth commandment, we found that if they do binding prayers in relationship to their parents, that they do not become subject to the retaliation. And so that's the structure that we've generally found. And so some people say it's an exorcism. Well, okay. It depends on how you define exorcism. If you define exorcism as solemn exorcism, which is the priest receiving faculties from the bishop in order to drive a demon out in the case of possession, it's obviously not that. The term minor exorcism historically referred to any prayer, any action done against a demon whatsoever, historically. So it was a much broader category than it's done. That being the case, St. Alphonsus Liguori, there's numerous authors, I even talk about it in Here to Saints, who say that the lay people actually have a right in relationship to themselves and those they have authority over to command the demons to leave. And that basically, and it's based upon, again, the authority structure or the obligations regarding the natural law, etc. And so they actually they can make use of those legitimately. Again, like I said, I and numerous exorcists that are highly, proficient in this area, they're on the same level that I am. I've all noticed these patterns are exactly how I laid them out in the book, that if you follow the authority structure, you're safe. It's when you step outside of that you're going to end up in trouble. And there's two kinds of binding prayers. There's binding prayers where you command the demon to leave. So by the power of the precious blood, I command the spirit of anger to leave, etc. But then you can, if you don't have any authority over somebody, you can petition Christ and Our Lady or Christ. I ask you to bind them, and then it's up to them to do it, and you're not going to get retaliated against, at least in our experience. So it's based partly on experience, but it's also unpacked theologically and based upon the practice of the church in the past.
Okay, so I couldn't say a binding prayer over you, obviously.
Not well, what we call an imprecatory one, which is you commanding the demons to leave. No, because you don't have authority over me.
But I could say, if I notice something about my neighbor 3 doors down, I could say, Jesus and Mary, if there's any demons, please deliver that person.
Yeah,
which is a supplicate. Petition. I could supplicate for that person. Now,
That's
if it's my wife or my children, you're saying that I do have the authority, or my house.
Right.
Only my house, right?
That's right.
Not my neighborhood.
Correct.
Unless I own it, which I don't.
Right.
But if my house, my land, whatever I have, my property, my car, my horse.
That's correct. Yeah, your property.
Yeah. I can say a binding prayer over that.
That's correct.
Now, can you say an example of that out loud, of what a father could say over his home or his wife or his child?
Yeah, so like, for example, if it's let's say his name's, your child's son's name is Johnny, just say, by the power of the precious blood, by the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and by my office as father, in relationship to Johnny, because your office as the father is what gives you the authority, I command the demon of disobedience to leave Johnny and go to the foot of the cross to receive his sentence.
Okay, good.
So
that's what I pray every night over my family.
Yes, exactly. And you can use the binding prayers not just when you see a problem, but as a preventative measure.
There are very good, theologically accurate people who, when they hear the binding prayer, they say, "No, that's wrong. You can't have any authority like that. Only a priest has that authority." In other words, they are trying to preserve the dignity and office of the priest.
They are, yeah.
So when they hear that and they say, "Well, how could a mother bind a demon over her children? She's not a priest. What is this? This is heresy." But you're saying it's only in these specific places where a person has an office over another person, which is father, mother, husband, wife, kids, those kind of scenarios. And even if a child, if you're an 80-year-old person and your child is 50, you still have that authority and you can still bind, correct?
That's correct.
Because it's still there.
Yeah. I do actually go into that in detail, and part of the reason that the chapter on authority is 80 pages long is precisely to parse out all that aspect of it. Part of it is by the time you get to that chapter, which is the 4th chapter on authority, I've already discussed in relationship to the angels that they have a natural law. So the demons, even the demons, have built into their minds the structure of the natural law, not just our natural law, but also the natural law of human beings. And that natural law grants certain rights, and the demons know they have to observe those things unless God gives them permission otherwise. But they know that they're bound by the natural law. And that's why, because someone recently said, well, I don't know where you came up with this idea of the natural law. Well, it's right in the book. If you actually follow the line of reasoning, it's because of the fact that the demons are still bound by the natural law in that regard, and God holds them to it. And so they know that we have natural law rights. Like you have a natural law right over joy, you have a natural law right over your children, you have a natural right over your house, etc. And therefore the demons have to accept that and observe that because of their own natural law built into their minds and into their wills. So that being the case, that's why the natural law structure actually works in the sense of, and that's why the demons know if you do something to which you have a right over, then they have no right to come back, or they have no claim to come back against you because you did something disordered.
Right. Now, what people are asking, what about in relationship to grandchildren, and what about in relationship to godchildren?
Okay, so I do talk about that in the book. So in relationship to godchildren, St. Thomas says you do not have the right of command, but the right of counsel. And so basically I tell people it's, at least in relationship to the authority structure, it's pretty easy. Can I tell the person to come mow my lawn? And are they bound to come mow my lawn if I tell them? So if you tell one of your sons, hey, go mow the lawn, well, he's got to go mow the lawn, right? That's not the case. So that the grandchildren are not under the grandparents in that same fashion. And so and as a result, grandparents have to do deprecatory or petition supplications in relationship to their grandchildren. Same with godchildren. Adopted children, the pattern that we noticed, and it seems to be because by the natural law, God conceded to civil authorities certain authority, although they seem to be out of control these days. They can, if the civil authorities, under legitimate circumstances, concede legal guardianship to the child as in the form of an adopted child, then the parents can do. They have authority over the child. They can command the demons to leave. So that's what we've noticed. Up until then, they can't. So
that makes sense to me. And then what about someone asked, can a single woman pray a binding prayer over her children? The answer is
yeah, if it's her children.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she still has the office of mother in relationship to them.
Good. And then I received a question just the other day. A woman said that her husband is living a very dissolute, life contrary to matrimony and all sorts of bad things. And she said, I know I can pray for him and do penance, but can I also bind? And I told her, as my understanding is, as your rights as a wife over your husband with his body, you can. Was I correct on that?
That's correct. Yeah, she can.
Yeah. So obviously this guy's dealing with some demons, maybe not obsessed or possessed, but
right.
I was like, I think in that relationship, yes.
Right. I think that in helping the people to have a conversion of life, we've also found this effective in really two areas, very effective. Parents with the children, the parents haven't been to mass. They've kind of fallen away from the Catholic faith. They're not really doing anything. They don't want to necessarily see a priest. I tell people, keep praying for them, but they'll start saying binding prayers against any demon that's keeping them from seeing a priest. It's extraordinary how often that works,
wow.
How effective it is. The other thing is we also find that, actually there's three areas I tell people. The second one is, if your son or daughter is dating somebody who you think is bad news, start saying binding prayers against any demons that's keeping them together. It's like clockwork. Within 3 to 4 weeks, the bad party in the relationship will leave the relationship.
Wow.
The other, I think there was only one woman who had to do it for like 3 months. But then there was, then the other one is conversion. So if you have somebody in your family that you want to convert, you obviously have to get them the grace, because you have to have the grace to convert, because you have to have grace in order to make that act of faith. However, demons can subvert people's response to that grace by afflicting them emotionally and psychologically. So say binding prayers against any demon that's keeping that person from coming into the church or accepting the faith. And that will also, if you keep it up, eventually it'll have its effect.